Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Colin Mahan, and I'm a program manager at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. For those of you who may not know, the NASDAQ Center is a nonprofit dedicated to enabling entrepreneurs from all over the world to realize their maximum potentials and grow. As you may have seen in the chat, the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center, along with our partner Mentor Cloud, launched a free mentor matching platform for entrepreneurs called Mentor Makers. Create your own advisory board to guide and inspire you with in-the-moment mentorship from topic experts and professionals dedicated to providing exceptional mentorship to entrepreneurs across all races, industries, and geographies. Together, we will build the greatest exchange of knowledge and expertise in service to entrepreneurs in business today. Find or become a mentor today by using the link in the chat or checking out Mentor Makers online. Entrepreneurs are the dreamers, doers, and visionaries who are not just solving the problems our community and world face today, but those that will create a better future for us all. Mentorship matters to all entrepreneurs. Their success depends on it. Quick housekeeping item. We're going to open up for live Q&A at the end of the event, so please submit your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation. Again, none of what we do could be possible without all the amazing support from our sponsors, including NASDAQ, Lehigh University, Bank of the West, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, Woodruff Sawyer, BPM, NZTE, and Microsoft for Startups. We're humbled by their contributions. Before we get started during these unique times, we're curious on how sentiment is among the entrepreneurs we work with. So we'd like to start by taking a poll to let us know on how you're feeling about your business right now. So I'm going to launch that one. Let us know how you're doing. We just started off the new year, and it is going at a great rate so far. We've got a lot of optimism flying in, so that's good. We've got some people just surviving, which is understandable, and some people with some anxious thoughts, so which is also understandable. So submit your response. I'm going to end this once we get a couple more. So thank you for responding, everybody. I'm going to end that and share those results. Looks like optimism is at the top of the key, which is a good thing. And for those of you feeling anxious and fearful, hopefully the education that we provide today will help with that. So I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to go to our next poll. This next poll helps us understand the topics that we should be offering at the center. So what's keeping you up at night? Is it finance? Is it sales, marketing, scaling, pivoting, team, or just merely surviving? So appreciate you guys giving us some input on this. This not only helps us understand what you all need out there in the ecosystem, but also helps guide our discussion today. So looks like finance is in the lead with sales, scale, pivot, team, and surviving coming behind it. So I'm going to end that poll and share those results with you all. So finance is at number 1, followed by scaling and then sales. So hopefully our discussion today will help you with just that. So appreciate you all sharing your sentiment and also what's keeping you up. Now, without any further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome to our special guest today. Jake Wood is the co-founder and CEO of Team Rubicon. Welcome, Jake.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Amazing. Well, we're just going to jump right in, if that's all right with you. Jake, your journey as a veteran and founder is immensely interesting and will lead us to sharing more about your latest book that just launched in November, Once a Warrior. At this moment, Jake, please share with us the beginning of your journey and how did you begin as a founder and what inspired you to take the leap?
Yeah, absolutely. I love kicking it off with an open-ended question. First, just let me say, thank you everybody for tuning in. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. We're living in some strange times, and hopefully you escaped 2020 with your businesses intact. Hopefully COVID-19 did not impact your friends, your family, your loved ones. I'm wishing all of you the best. And I do hope that the conversation today lends you some insight into how you might be able to reduce that anxiety as we enter 2021. I'll tell you a little bit about my background, my backstory. I was a college football player on 9/11. I was playing football at the University of Wisconsin when 9/11 happened. And that was, of course, a turning point for our country. It was also a big turning point in my life. As soon as I graduated a few years later, I ended up joining the Marine Corps. My aspirations of playing professional football didn't quite play out. So when people ask me how I ended up in the Marine Corps, I tell them I didn't end up in the NFL. And I don't even want to make you wonder. I wasn't even close. But in joining the Marine Corps, I joined at the height of the war and trained in the infantry and ended up deploying my first tour to Iraq in 2007 at the height of the surge. And after my squad leader was wounded, I took charge of that squad. And for the next 7 months, I led a squad of Marines through the deadliest province of Iraq during the deadliest year of the war. And it taught me a lot about leadership. It taught me a lot about what it takes to inspire and motivate people in very high stakes circumstances to improvise, adapt, and overcome, in order to accomplish, a mission. After Iraq, I came back and I was recruited into a Marine Scout Sniper platoon. And I had the opportunity to go to sniper school, which for the Marine Corps is probably the hardest school in the Marine Corps. It's got about a 60 to 70% failure rate. So it was a very challenging opportunity for me. I like to tell people I went to bed every night thinking that I probably shouldn't have survived the day. And I woke up every morning wondering why I was doing that to myself, because it was just really that hard. But after 10 weeks, I was fortunate enough to graduate. And shortly after that, was deployed to Afghanistan as part of a scout sniper team. And that was also a very challenging tour. It was a challenging mission full of ambiguity and uncertainty. It was extraordinarily dangerous and at times confusing, but once again, taught me a lot, not just about leadership, but about what is required of leaders in those moments of ambiguity, of moral complexity, and the obligation that leaders have to lead with virtue and to lead with integrity first and foremost, above all things. And that's hard for leaders to do, especially when times get tough. And I think we saw that often throughout the last year as the world was really gripped with such uncertainty. At the end of the day, I got out of the Marine Corps after 4 years. I was proud of my service, but I felt lucky that I came back from 2 hard tours with all of my fingers and all of my toes, to put it quite frankly. And I made the decision to get out. And, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so when I was getting out in 2009, I was trying to think about what I was going to do next. It was really kind of the height of the Silicon Valley entrepreneurship craze. And I felt that's what I want to do. But I figured that, it was going to be pretty hard to go up to Silicon Valley and knock on, the front door of Twitter's headquarters and convince them that as a sniper, I had the skill sets that they wanted to hire to improve their business. So I figured I was going to go back and get an MBA. But life had other plans. I ended up starting a nonprofit organization called Team Rubicon. And we started it actually exactly 12 years ago, or I'm sorry, 11 years ago today, in response to the Haiti earthquake, as we are here on the 11th anniversary of that terrible disaster. I felt compelled to help. I organized a team of veterans and doctors to go down to Port-au-Prince right after the earthquake. And while we were down there delivering medical aid, we realized that disasters were so similar in so many ways to battlefields, the battlefields we just served on. And so, the skills and experiences that we gained in the military was really applicable in helping us to serve in that capacity. So we came back and we incorporated it as a nonprofit organization. And over the course of the last, over a decade now, we've built it into one of the fastest growing nonprofits in America. We've raised over $250 million to do the work that we've done. We've scaled to over 130,000 volunteers. And we respond to disasters and crises ranging from things like earthquakes, floods, and hurricanes to issues like civil wars and global pandemics, where we've been plugged in response to COVID-19 since the beginning of the pandemic. So really excited to talk about how we've been able to do what we've done and share some of those lessons with you today.
Amazing, Jake. So many reactions to what you just mentioned. I mean, first of all, thank you for your service. And one of our attendees says, hoorah, which I'm not sure I'm allowed to say, but thank you for your service, first and foremost. And what you're doing is very valuable work. They often say that the founder's journey is nonlinear, and I think you're a great case study for that. What mindsets did you adopt during your journey that you think founders in our community today and online need to adopt to be successful?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting that you make the comment about a founder's journey being nonlinear. I got out and I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but what does that even really mean? What's it mean to say I want to be an entrepreneur? That's not an occupation. An occupation is, the job or the industry that you choose, the type of company that you choose to build. Being an entrepreneur doesn't really mean anything. And here I was thinking that I was going to have to go, literally relocate myself physically to the Bay Area and join somebody else's company to be an entrepreneur or to be entrepreneurial. And my idea just hit me in the face. It was an earthquake. It was a moment in time. It was a challenge that I moved to address that became the idea for my entrepreneurial journey. So I couldn't agree more with your comment. So what traits, helped me early on? I think that one of the things that we had early was this foolish optimism that we could change the world, or that we could really at least build a better mousetrap. The first job descriptions that we ever posted, they led with the same line. They led with, we're looking for individuals foolish enough to think they can change the world and smart enough to have a chance. And so it was really this pursuit of, people to join the team who had this foolish optimism. And I phrase it that way because you almost have to be foolish in your belief of what you're capable of. Entrepreneurs can't quite be grounded in reality. And don't get me wrong, you have to be realistic, but if you don't have this foolish optimism, you're never going to dream big enough to actually pull your organization forward. But you have to balance that foolish optimism with this grit and tenacity that is really what's going to get you past all of those moments when life punches you in the face, because you can be as optimistic as you want. The reality is, starting a business, being an entrepreneur, has so much friction in the process. It seems like the world, the universe is literally conspiring against you at every turn. You don't raise all the money that you need. Your product market fit isn't as ideal as you thought. Your customer acquisition costs are higher than you expected. Your team is full of infighting. Your board of directors is, breathing down your neck. Like, there's so much friction in the process. All you can do as an entrepreneur is clench your jaw and grit your teeth and commit yourself to enduring for one moment more. And so I think of those two things as like the hallmarks of any successful entrepreneur: foolish optimism and a tenacity that overcomes all of that friction that you encounter inevitably along the way.
I love that. And they have to come together, not just one or the other, right?
Yeah.
Amazing. So you spoke to a little bit about this, but I'm going to give you an easy one. Why does the world need Team Rubicon?
Yeah, well, that's a kind of a softball question. When as an entrepreneur, you have to think about, okay, what's the problem that you're solving? What's the size of the market that you're approaching? And it's no different for nonprofit entrepreneurs or social entrepreneurs like I am. And so, we came back from Haiti, and quite frankly, we actually couldn't conceptualize the size of the issue that we were facing, which was inadequate disaster response. I think most people kind of assume that there are one or two or three big disasters a year, and that the world and Mother Nature is otherwise pretty quiet beyond that. But the truth is, if you just look at the United States, there are literally 300, 400, 500 disasters a year that are just happening inside our borders. Disasters are increasing in frequency and cost. That's in part due to climate change. It's also in part due to growing population sizes and the fact that most of them are starting to move towards water features, which exacerbate dramatically the cost and impact of disasters when they happen. So this is an increasing issue, and it's increasing at a frightening rate. And the current paradigms that we have for creating resilience in our communities, for effectively responding when these things invariably happen, they're outdated, they're outmoded. And so our philosophy, our value proposition was, we've sent 3 million men and women overseas to fight these wars in the Middle East. And listen, we don't want to let's not get into the politics of the wars. I think there's probably going to be a variety of opinions on the call, but nonetheless, we've sent these men and women over there. We've spent taxpayer money training them to the highest standards on the most, high-tech equipment imaginable. And we've asked them to execute that training, those tasks in the most austere environments, in the most challenging environments imaginable. These are immensely talented people. They're incredible problem solvers. And yet when these people have come home, we're not tapping back into those skills, those experiences to add value back into our community. And so what Team Rubicon said is, we've got a disaster problem, but we also have this incredible human capital that's sitting idly in our communities, that's trained for moments of chaos, that can lead communities through these events. And so what we've done is we've built a system and a network that's tapped into tens of thousands of military veterans to help lead our communities and communities around the world through these moments of disasters and crises.
I love that. And I also love that you started off with, there's not much difference between a nonprofit and a for-profit entrepreneur. They're both solving problems for the world.
Yeah, I mean, hardly any. I think that's, as an entrepreneur, that's one of those things that drives me insane. When I have the opportunity to go to a lot of different, events and conferences, I count many, I guess, well-known entrepreneurs and founders as friends and colleagues. And nothing, pardon my language, but nothing chaps my ass more than when we're sitting around drinking a beer, having dinner, and they learn that you run a nonprofit instead of a for-profit, and they think it's like a cute little charity. It's like, hey, we didn't build your mama's charity. This is a serious enterprise. We are driven by technology. We're leveraging artificial intelligence in the work that we're doing. We have to raise $50 million a year to execute our work. This is not, a group of people that are standing outside a grocery store ringing a bell in front of a red kettle. This is a sophisticated entity. And if you do find yourself as a social entrepreneur, don't sell yourself short. Don't allow anybody to think, to paint you into that corner.
I love that. Inspiring and super helpful. When you launched Team Rubicon, what was most important to you at the time? And has that changed?
What was most important to us at the time? I think it's similar to what I was just talking about. I never fancied myself a social entrepreneur. It was not my intent when I got out of the Marine Corps. It was not my goal or ambition. And so as I found myself kind of stumbling into being a nonprofit founder, I was really passionate about really reimagining what a nonprofit could be, what it could look like. And so really challenging myself and my team to take on those conventions. And I'm really proud of the way that this organization has evolved. We are known for many things, but one of the things we're known for is our innovation. I have a whole technology team of full stack developers. We're cranking out, custom technology solutions for really complex problems. We're giving away those tools to the space so that they can all improve utilizing the stuff that we're building. It's things like that. It's that type of approach that we were really passionate about. And so, what's the ends to those means, right? For us, it's been increased efficiency in the work that we do, greater impact on the ground for the communities that we're serving, which means that, by being able to do more with less, we can stretch those charitable dollars further, because again, the problems that we're facing, they're enormous.
Very true. So Team Rubicon is one of the greatest veteran engagement orgs in the nation, from what I can tell. What have been some of your biggest challenge faced as a veteran entrepreneur and founder?
Yeah, I mean, we've scaled a lot over the years. Over the last 11 years, we've gone from 8 volunteers to almost 150,000. We've gone from a $100,000 budget to a $50 million budget. And so what have been the challenges? People and money, just like any business, right? you fall into this false hope, this false belief that you can solve your problems with those two things: more people or more money. But more people, more problems; more money, more problems is the reality. And so as we've scaled, the organization, any company's complexity doesn't grow linearly to the size of that company's payroll or the size of that company's org chart, right? Every person that you add adds just a multitude of complexity to your organization. So if you go from 10 people to 20 people, you're not twice as complex. You're probably 50 times more complex. And so as we went from 10 employees to 20 to 200 employees now, just, the challenges in managing those people, not just, helping to clearly identify their roles and continuing to, shift the org structure so that you're optimizing how people are impacting, the mission and the objectives, but also managing, outgrowing talent. How do you manage people out of the organization? How do you build a culture that is really a culture that people aspire to be a part of in the long term? And then there's money. I mean, the reality is that the bigger your company gets, the higher the stakes become. And with those stakes, with those high stakes, you have, the anxiety of not making payroll. It used to be that when we were running a $5 million budget a year, you get a $1 million grant. Hey, you just made 20% of your revenue target. I need to get $50 million grants now, $1 million grants. Raising $1 million is, it's 2% of target for me. That means you got to find a lot of bigger fish, and the stakes are really, really high. So it's challenging, but it's also immensely rewarding. So I wouldn't change it for the world.
Love it. And speaking of the stakes being high, I'm sure you took some risks in the beginning days. And as a veteran entrepreneur, you mentioned not being initially well received by the Twitter community out there, right? So what are some of the risks you take, and how'd you overcome them?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the chapters in my book actually talks about a really consequential moment for me as an entrepreneur and for the organization. It was 2012. And so we're about 2 years into the business. We've had some success, but we're certainly not, we haven't arrived yet. And in fact, we're actually failing. Despite some initial success, we're on the brink of insolvency. We'd had some early wins with some fundraising, but our long-term assumptions around how we were going to be able to raise revenue were just simply proving not to be true. Raise your hand if you've been in that situation. And so it's late in the year in 2012, and I have a conversation where I sit down with my director of finance, and she basically walks me through the spreadsheets, and she says, "Jake, we're going to run out of money if things don't change here in the next couple of weeks." And I often tell people, you're not an entrepreneur until you've had that conversation, until you've looked at a spreadsheet and started checking boxes about what bills you're not going to pay and which ones you are going to pay. And in a couple of weeks after that conversation, Hurricane Sandy hit New York. And, some of you probably remember Hurricane Sandy. Some of you may even have been living in New York when it happened. But, Team Rubicon immediately sprung into action. We had some teams deployed up and down the coast, in and around New York City and Connecticut, New Jersey. But we didn't have enough money to scale the mission. And I really looked at that, and I saw it for what it was. It was this moment in time that was going to come to define the organization, because we had a choice to make. We could play it safe, knowing that we were running out of funds, and we could husband or shepherd those funds so that we didn't run out of them, or we could bet on ourselves. And as an entrepreneur, if you find yourself at that moment in time where you have the opportunity to bet on yourself and you don't bet on yourself, well, that's when you lose the team. That's when you lose the momentum. That's when you probably should come to learn that you don't have what it takes to be an entrepreneur. Well, in that moment, we bet on ourselves. We literally closed down our office in Los Angeles. We relocated all of our staff to New York, and we rolled the dice. We put all of our chips on the table, and we took a bet on ourselves. And it was, the single biggest turning point in the organization. I don't know if the organization would have survived. It certainly would not have scaled to where it is today if we hadn't taken that bet. And so there's a whole chapter in the book about that moment. And And I look back on it, with some pride, but also a little bit of anxiety, because it was one of those moments where, you weren't sleeping because you just didn't know how it was going to play out.
Yeah, and I'm sure many on the call can understand what that moment feels like. And if and I love that if you don't bet on yourself, nobody will bet on you. Um, Going back to the book, it shares lessons from modern military leadership that can be applied for entrepreneurs. So any of those that you think would be helpful for our resource-constrained entrepreneurs, especially in this current climate?
Yeah. Well, I do a lot of public speaking around leadership and organizational culture. And there are some, I think, timeless lessons that I learned from the military that, they may have been tested on the battlefield, but they're absolutely applicable in any environment, whether it's the disaster zone like we do at Team Rubicon, or the boardroom, wherever you are, whatever market or sector you might be in. There's maybe a couple that I'll touch on here. You know, Business is complex, right? In the military developed this acronym 30 years ago for what the modern day battlefield had become. The acronym was VUCA: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I think this last year indicated just how quickly a VUCA environment can overcome people. COVID-19, there was no playbook for this. We hadn't seen anything like this in 100 years. And it's really, it's a false comparison to try to compare what we experienced here with COVID to the Spanish flu of 1918. The world is just fundamentally different. So there really was no template for how to respond. And so how as leaders, as entrepreneurs, do you guide your teams, your organizations through a VUCA environment like COVID-19? First one is velocity. You have to have a speed in decision-making. These moments tend to overwhelm people. And so you may not have the answers, but you need to get to answers quickly. And that means, not waiting for perfect solutions. There's the phrase, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. The military has a saying, in the absence of a plan, run toward the sound of gunfire, right? If you don't have a plan, if you get ambushed and you don't have a plan for how to counter that, you're not going to develop that plan by hunkering down behind a rock. You're going to counter that plan by running towards the action, because what happens when you do that is you build momentum. That's really important in the business world, right? You inspire confidence for the people following you, but you're also encountering that problem head on, right? You're encountering, I used the phrase earlier, friction. And by encountering that friction, by being at that point of friction, you can discern all the elements of what you're facing and begin to identify the variables that really matter, isolate the things that you need to solve for, and begin creating solutions, on the fly. So, in the absence of a plan, run towards the sound of gunfire. It only translates so well off the battlefield into the boardroom, but, you can probably change a few of those words there, and it's apropos for the work that you do. Another one that I like to encourage people to think about, in addition to that velocity of action, is agility. When you don't have a plan, that plan or that answer isn't going to come from that leader, right? It rarely does, particularly in moments for which there's no precedent, right? So COVID-19, again, back to what I said earlier, there was no precedent. When there's precedent, then leaders who have experience can relay the answer to their team. They can say, I have experienced this before. Here is a plan that works. But again, in the absence of that plan, you have to actually step back, push your team forward, and allow them to encounter that issue one-on-one at that tactical level. And once they do that, they have that agility. They're empowered to go out, ideate solutions. If you're doing a good job of disseminating that information, that knowledge, that body of knowledge as it's being developed, then you can begin to formulate a real strategic action plan. But you really have to let go of that tactical level to allow them to go out and engage those problems and those challenges at their level in order to begin getting that solution. I think what people tend to do in these moments of chaos is they tend to kind of put their arms around their team and bring them in close. They try to protect them from the issue. But the reality is these moments are overwhelming. And all you're gonna do is ensure that you die together if you do this, right? What you have to do is liberate your teams, empower them to go out and do what they do best. And you can do that if you've built the right team, if you've created a culture internally that guides decisions in the absence of orders. That's how I talk about culture. People say, oh, what's corporate culture? For me, organizational culture is what guides people's decisions and actions when they're not being told what to do. Right. So if you have a strong culture, then you don't have to sit there and micromanage them in those moments. You empower them to go out and execute. And all of that just, again, reinforces this notion of speed. And it's all about speed to action in these moments of chaos.
That's super helpful. And I hope the attendees took notes because it's valuable information. And people are saying, run towards the action. I love it. Well, as I mentioned earlier, mentorship is at the core of what the center does. Mentorship helps entrepreneurs in ways and shapes and forms that can be sometimes unmeasured. How has mentorship played a role in your success?
Yeah, well, I'm very fortunate. My mentor throughout most of my life has been my father, or was my father. My father unfortunately passed away about 5 years ago. But he was a guy that I always turned to. Not college educated, but wise in ways that I just always really, really appreciated. He had a way of distilling complicated issues down to the one or two things that were really at their core. And so, I could spend 30 minutes explaining to him a problem, and in 2 sentences, he'd repeat back to me exactly what the issue was. And being able to distill with that level of clarity complex issues is just such a valuable trait. The thing I've learned about mentorship outside of my father is it's more about being a good mentee, right? You can have the best mentor in the world. If you're a bad mentee, you're going to make him or her, your mentor, you're really ineffective. What I've learned, I'm a really bad mentee. So, I could do a better job of going out and seeking mentors and being a good mentee. Truth be told, I'm not particularly good at it. I find myself getting distracted. I've most of my mentoring has come from books and from peers, observing my colleagues and really interacting with them at a peer level in a way that allows me to poke and prod around how they're solving their issues. And what I've come to learn is that, organizations, companies, and what they do are almost entirely unique from one another, but the problems they face are universal. And so, it's those moments when I sit around a table, with a couple of beers with colleagues who run internet companies or direct consumer companies or whatever it might be. And I realize, oh, wow, I respond to disasters for a living, but I have the exact same challenges as this guy who sells high-end shorts to people on Instagram, which, you would never imagine would have anything in common, but the challenges of entrepreneurship are universal.
Totally. And then I'm sure throughout your experience, you have become a mentor to many. Can you share a little bit about that and how you've learned from being a mentee to being a mentor?
Well, I try to. Certainly the culture that we've built at Team Rubicon is one in which there's not much of a distinction between the CEO and our associates, our most junior employees. I do my best to try to take them aside, talk to them about what they're facing, and really, as a peer, not as a boss, help to shape their perspective and contextual understanding of the challenges that they're facing. And listen, I think the most important thing you can do in that is to make it not just about the business. To be a mentor to people in their personal lives as frequently as you are in their professional lives. And when you are talking to them in the context of their professional life, don't make it about your organization. Make it about their professional career. And that may mean helping them to understand, their opportunities beyond your organization, right? And it's when you can do that with a level of authenticity where people understand that they're not just a cog in your machine, but that you really see them for who they are, that they're a human being, that they're an important human being in your organization, that they have value in your organization. But at the end of the day, your relationship with that person is not tied simply through your organization and the fact that they're on a W-2, a payroll for your company.
We're all human at the end of the day. And often something that I hear from a lot of our mentor community is that it's a two-way street. They learn from their mentees. They're doing it because it's a learning experience and a journey in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I what I try to tell our junior staff is take time to try to mentor them as often as I can is I get great joy working. I get energy and joy from the people that I work with, and that's at all levels of our organization. And so mentoring them for me is in some ways a selfish endeavor. Maybe not because I'm learning as much, but I'm getting energy from the process, from their enthusiasm. And so, that's a lot of what it has to do for me.
It's amazing. So as a veteran and as a graduate of the sniper school that I just learned has a very low graduation rate, so congratulations there. I'm sure you are very well versed on training. So how did you use your military training to help you overcome challenges as a founder in the early days?
How did I use my training to overcome challenges as a founder? Well, I think that there's a couple of things. One, I think it was attitude as much as anything, and I spoke a little bit about that earlier. It's that foolish optimism combined with that ability to clench your jaw, grit your teeth, and overcome anything that I think the military teaches pretty well. I mean, at the end of the day, sniper school is a grueling 10-week course where there are moments when it's really literally just about putting one foot in front of the other on a 12-mile run under a 60-pound pack over the Alpha Shelf at Camp Pendleton. Those are moments where it's really just about breaking down these long, hard journeys into their tiniest bits. It's that next step. In boot camp, you talk about getting simply to the next meal. Hey, if I make it to lunch, I'm going to be okay. And then you get done with lunch and you realize life still sucks. And then it's just about getting to dinner. And then it's just about surviving to breakfast, right? And so that's literally how you get through those moments. And so I think one of those lessons that is applicable is that old adage of how do you eat an elephant, right? How do you eat an elephant? You eat it one bite at a time. You don't look at the elephant and think, how am I ever going to accomplish this? You just start chewing. And that was really an attitude. I think another one is, it's kind of an acronym that I think is, more widely known now, but it's that whole principle of KISS, keep it simple, stupid, which I think the Marine Corps would like to take credit for. I'm not sure if they actually can or not, but this idea of there's elegance in simplicity. Running a business is really complex. Entering a new market is complex. Taking on a competitor is complex. At the end of the day, it's incumbent upon leaders to make the complex simple. Because winning and leading, even in the most complicated environments imaginable, is really about finding ways to make it simple. And I think that the military teaches leaders to do that well, because complicated things break. Complicated things have too many opportunities to go wrong. Simplicity allows people to innovate on the fly. It allows people to be resilient in the systems that are created. It allows people to explore and I said innovate earlier, but it just unlocks so much potential. And so, one of the things I did early was keep it simple.
Amazing. And I love the training acronym of get to the next meal, because I've used the how do you eat an elephant one, but getting to the next meal is a good one. I'm going to use that. Well, companies in every industry right now are transforming as they navigate the disruptions brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. How has your company transformed over the past 3 months? And what's your advice to some founders that are dealing with challenges just from the current ecosystem that we're in right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're a disaster response organization, and we have responded to infectious disease outbreaks before. So when COVID-19 was first sweeping through China and Southeast Asia, we were monitoring it. And I don't think any of us predicted then, back in January of last year, before it really jumped shores to the US, that it would get this bad. But we knew that there was a possibility. So we had a planning team that was giving the leadership team, myself included, daily updates. By early February, we were having twice daily leadership calls. And it became obvious, by around that time that this was going to be bad. There's another military adage that I'll add to your vocabularies. Maybe you've heard it before, but it's hope is not a strategy. And early in the pandemic, this was something that I said to my team early, that we saw a lot of people, leaders, government leaders, elected officials, institutional leaders who were relying on hope that COVID wouldn't be that bad. They hoped it wouldn't come to the US. They hoped it wouldn't be that infectious. They hoped it wouldn't be that deadly. They hoped it wouldn't be airborne. Well, you can hope all goddamn day. At the end of the day, facts are facts, and the reality is going to punch you in the face. And so hope is not a strategy. So early on, we said, we have to embrace the brutal truth of what we're facing. We cannot sugarcoat this. We have to turn to our teams and convey to them in very blunt, sobering terms that this is going to be bad. We don't know how bad it's going to be. It's going to dramatically impact our lives, and we're not sure when things will ever get to normal. So that was kind of first things first. Like, don't treat your teams, or don't act like you have to put velvet gloves on when you're talking to your teams. I think people appreciate that level of bluntness. They want to know that you are taking a threat very, very seriously. And then we settled on this principle that all of the policies and procedures and processes that we had built to respond to crises were built for a non-COVID environment. And to survive and thrive in a COVID environment, we were going to have to fundamentally rethink every single thing that we did. And so it wasn't about trying to force our old models of operating to adapt to a COVID environment. It was literally burn it all to the ground. And now we have to rebuild everything that we do for COVID-19. And so, it was really dramatic action that positioned us to be effective. We completely destroyed our org structure in March. We had 200 employees, in a traditional hierarchical org chart. We said that was built for non-COVID. So we basically broke every single reporting structure that we had. We reformulated the organization into 5 task forces, focused solely on pivoting the organization into responding to COVID-19. Now we've started to retool some of those things back to original form as we've settled into a new normal and a new battle rhythm. But it was really I think our ability to embrace the brutal facts of what we were facing that allowed us to make some really, really tough decisions, but act with authority early. And what did that unlock? So none of that matters if it didn't actually unlock value. We packaged, shipped, and delivered 50 million pounds of food last year. We'd never packaged a single pound of food prior to COVID-19. We sent 100 medics into Navajo Nation, treated 3,000 COVID positive patients there. We opened dozens of mobile testing sites throughout the West, testing almost 100,000 citizens for COVID-19. And these are all things, by the way, that we had never done before COVID. So these were all brand new mission sets that we launched in the opening days and weeks after COVID. And on top of that, we continued responding to one of the worst hurricane seasons in the last 100 years. And so across 20,000 deployments last year, we only had 7 positive COVID transmissions. So what we were able to prove is that you can act quickly, act decisively, but not irrationally, and not put your people in undue danger, right? And so there's a lot that went into that, but it was that velocity of decision-making early and an agility, pushing our teams out into these communities early in the pandemic, trusting that they were going to be the ones who were going to solve the problems for us, that we could then formalize and develop as a standard package across the enterprise later on as they were developed.
Well, it sounds like you really made an impact and innovated. And as a disaster response organization, I'm sure the pressure was on to be able to do so. So congratulations on all the work that you've done and all the new things. We at the center, for those of you who are joining us who've met us in person, we used to host in-person classes, and now here we all are online. Yeah. So we too were faced with understanding how to put everything together digitally. Speaking of innovation and changes in the industry, what innovations are you seeing on the horizon within your industry or even company?
Yeah, we've been doing a lot in the technology space over the last couple of years. We've got a partnership with Microsoft that is really fundamental to how we operate. So we've been building enterprise software systems in partnership with Microsoft for volunteer organizations. And in fact, right now we're doing a user acceptance testing on another video call that I'll be joining here as soon as we're done for a new module that we'll be releasing. And so, we're really proud. We launched our first module about 2 years ago. It's a volunteer management system. We think it's become the industry standard for managing volunteers. The approach that we took is that we're investing millions and millions of dollars into these systems, and then we're giving them away for free. So all of the base code that we're developing in partnership with Microsoft, we're making it all open source so that any nonprofit organization out there who's encountering the same challenges we are, like, hey, how do you manage complex operations with thousands of volunteers, can take the systems that we're building and implement them for their own organization. I think there's tremendous opportunity on the horizon for nonprofits to harness artificial intelligence. I understand that that's a buzzword, and not many people really understand the true impact it can have. But when you're a nonprofit that is scraping together budgets on an annual basis, you have to be able to eke out efficiencies wherever you can. And AI, custom-built AI, purpose-built AI has a real opportunity to do that. We're already leveraging it for some of the stuff that we do internally. We're saving literally thousands and thousands of man hours each year based off the AI tools that we've already built. That translates to hundreds of thousands of dollars that we no longer have to dedicate in our budget to these rote processes that we required somebody just clicking boxes on in an old antiquated system is now replaced by AI. So we're really proud of some of the innovations we're having there.
It's exciting and looking forward to hearing about the progress. All right, well, we're going to jump into Q&A in just a moment. So if you guys have any questions for Jake as a founder, as what he's up to next, feel free to put those into the Q&A box. But Jake, to close us out for our discussion before we get into Q&A, what's one takeaway based on your book and or founder's journey that you think the entrepreneurs should learn from today? What's the most important one? And then what's 2021 got for Team Rubicon other than your amazing partnership with Microsoft?
Yeah, I think, when I reflected back on the book after, finishing it and seeing it published, I reread it and I kind of distilled it down into a series of moments and decisions, and I think that that's really what life is about. The universe presents to you these moments in time where you have choices to make. And sometimes in those moments, you don't understand how consequential they'll be to your life, to your journey, to the company you're building, to your family, to whatever they might be. Sometimes you make the right choice and you look back in hindsight and you can't ever imagine, having screwed up that moment. Sometimes you make the wrong choice and you may not even know you made the wrong choice in the moment. But, sometimes the universe circles back and gives you the opportunity to revisit that choice and to make a different one. And so I'd encourage you as entrepreneurs to think about your life as a series of moments and a series of consequential choices, and to really reflect inwardly on the choices that you're making. And to also, when the universe seems like it's whispering in your ear, listen, because it probably is. It certainly has been the case for me over the last couple of decades. As far as 2021 and Team Rubicon, we are aggressively moving into the vaccination game, and we are running 8 vaccination pilots right now in cities across the country, working with healthcare systems, counties, and city public health agencies to get shots in arms. At the end of the day, folks, put what you've heard aside. These vaccines are safe, they're effective, and the only way this country and the world gets back to normal is if people raise their hand and get a needle in their arm. I'd encourage you all to do it the moment that you're offered the opportunity. If not for yourself, then for your neighbors. At the end of the day, this country was built not on a what's in it for me attitude, but what's in it for others. And we got to make sure that we're taking that approach as we're trying to get back to normal here in 2021.
That's amazing and super important work. The sooner we can all get back to normal, I think the better. Transitioning into live Q&A, we've got a couple questions coming in. One is surrounding around growth. So Kelly asks, how can I continue to find strategies for growth and outside of the box thinking in terms of expansion in an industry that is not well documented as other retail niches? So how to uncover stones, or how to even seek opportunity in times like this.
Yeah, I'd offer a couple of thoughts. One, as a CEO, and this is probably would have been a better answer to the mentorship question earlier. You have a choice when you're hiring your team, particularly your senior leadership team. You can hire people who are demonstrably less talented than you, or you can hire people that are going to challenge the hell out of you and force you to grow as a leader in new ways. And so why does that matter to your question? I think I'd really encourage you to surround yourself with high performing, highly experienced people who, you may get anxious about doing that. You may fall victim to some insecurity you have as a leader. And I don't say that in a bad way. I mean, as entrepreneurs, you should all be a little insecure. You should be thinking somebody's coming for your job at every turn. I always tell people I'm auditioning for my job every day. But surround yourself with people that are going to challenge you. That's going to stretch you. It's going to stretch collectively the way you as a group with those senior leaders think and explore opportunities. So I think one of the things I did well was I hired a senior leadership team that continues to challenge me every day in really, really positive ways. It has forced me to grow. So that's one. And the second thing is that it's that agility that I spoke about earlier. Empower your teams to go out, identify opportunities in the market, identify unique product market fits, unique go-to-market strategies. And you'd be shocked how many great ideas are lying there under the surface, just ready for your teams to uncover. But you're never going to uncover them yourselves. You got to push them out the door and encourage them to go out there and find them.
Love it. Leave no stone unturned. I've got a question that I enjoy. So what advice would you give your younger self? And I believe this one is even oriented towards before you're a football player.
Oh, okay. So young self. Great question. What advice would I give my younger self? Take school more seriously. I was a good student. I got really good grades, but I was able to get good grades without really learning anything. And I look back and I think about not even about, how it would have made me better at my job. I'm pretty good at numbers. I understand finance. I'm thinking about just the breadth of knowledge and growth that I missed by not taking school seriously. And I just, I regret it. You can't have those years back. So anyway, I think I would probably give myself that advice. And then, I had the real honor and pleasure of going back and giving the commencement speech at my alma mater 10 years ago, I guess now, at the University of Wisconsin. And it was an incredible experience, but the advice I gave them, I think I would have been well served to hear earlier, which is, you think you have a plan in life, but life's going to have other plans, and that's okay. I thought I knew what I was going to do with my life, and the universe showed me a different moment, a different opportunity that I said yes to. And it's been the greatest decision of my life, even though what I'm doing today is nothing that I ever would have imagined I'd ever do.
Sound advice. Everyone's getting so many good sound bites from you today, Jake. You alluded to a little bit of this, but we had a question come in on suggestions for communications and remote team building now that we're all working mostly remotely.
Yeah, it's, this is like what confounds any business leader. I think pre-COVID, if your company was anything like Team Rubicon, when you would do, employee surveys, the number one complaint was probably always communications, internal communications. I don't know what's going on. I don't understand what we're doing or why, regardless of how frequently you've communicated it across however many mediums that you have. It's always frustrating. And what I've learned, again, through, kind of these commiserating moments that I have with other entrepreneurs, is that that's universal. What I would tell you is communicate in unambiguous terms. Be very clear and concise in what you're communicating. Don't leave any room for interpretation. Say exactly what you mean and why you mean it. And that, again, that's a hallmark of military leadership. There's when you're giving an order in the military, I'll use a quick example. Officers or commanders aren't left to issue that order in whatever flowery language they want. There's a literal formula for how they have to issue it. It's you have a task and you have a purpose. In between those two things are 3 words: in order to. So you have a task in order to accomplish this purpose. And that is literally how you give an order. And what that does is it allows people who are hearing that order to know exactly what they're hearing. So they know that they're going to be told a task, they're going to be told a purpose for that task, and they know that the purpose comes after those 3 words so that they don't miss it. Those 3 words literally trigger them to listen. The purpose is coming next. And so when the task fails, at least they have that purpose, and then they know how they can improvise, adapt, and overcome to still accomplish the objective that is underlying that purpose. Why do I use that example? It leaves no room for interpretation, okay? And in these moments, these environments like COVID, particularly when we're remote and you can't read body language, you can't sometimes read tone, unambiguous language is really, really critical. So that would be kind of one piece of advice. And then how do you just kind of keep people involved? Man, we saw this early. The temptation is to hop on these Zoom calls and just get straight to business. Like we've lost the water cooler in our companies. And Team Rubicon was not a remote company. We were a very much in-person, in an office company. And when you don't have that water cooler, you don't learn about all of those other things that are happening in your people's lives. You don't understand what challenges they're facing. And those are things that are going to be impacting their jobs. Those are the moments where you can convince them once again that you care about them, not just as a cog in your machine, but as a human being with, your own ambitions and your own future to be concerned about. And so you have to force the time to sit down with people in a non-work way. Even if it's just the first 5 minutes, you shoot the shit and you allow yourself the opportunity, the agenda to have that 5 minute slip. Even if people are going to say, oh, this is inefficient, we should get down to business. No, that is business because people are your business. So you have to make the time for them.
Love it. Sound advice. All right. Well, we don't have time to get to all the questions, but we'll try our best. Jake, we've got one that refers to a little bit about what you were talking about with senior management. So if your senior managers possess technical expertise that you don't, and then entrenched decisions and directions that differ from your own experience and beliefs, how do you deal with that conflict?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it really depends. Is the conflict due to their technical expertise? Like, are they saying that what you want to do is technically not feasible? And as a subject matter expert, perhaps you should be listening to them and you're actually the one who needs to evolve your thinking? Or is it really more about strategy and vision and philosophy? I think if it's the former, you need to check your ego at the door. There's a reason why you brought in subject matter experts, and you should assume, you should trust their expertise. You should trust their intent in conveying to you their difference of opinion. But if it's philosophical, if it's strategic, if it's vision, obviously you need to be self-aware and you need to evaluate things from their perspective. You don't shut it down. But if there's a real fundamental difference in those core beliefs about the organization, then frankly, it's just time to move on. And I think that was one of the harder lessons that I learned early was how to fire people. You can't fire people in the military. It doesn't exist. You go to war with the team you have. And so it was actually an interesting new skill to learn to manage people off a team. But it's a critical one because you can't have division on those core things like mission, vision, and strategy. You have to be fully aligned.
Sound advice. Well, Jake, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us and share some of your insights, some of your journey, and many of your golden nuggets that I'm going to take. So on behalf of everyone here on the team at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center and everyone in attendance, I am sure, thank you so much for joining us. For everyone still on the call, we've got a couple of upcoming webinars. This Thursday, we've got Securing Funding as an Aspiring Entrepreneur with AMZ as a case study. And then also this Friday on the 15th, we've got LinkedIn Marketing Effectively and Authentically to Grow Your Business with George Cao. He's coming back. So we're excited for that. Thanks again, Jake, for joining us. Thank you all for dialing in today, and we look forward to seeing you all online soon.